As you know, if you're a regular listener to this podcast, you know I have a very dim and negative outlook about what's going to happen during the 2022 midterm elections and what will happen in the 2024 presidential and general elections in 2024. And it's a natural tendency on my part, because of what I've witnessed over the past half century, to fall into this kind of despair, I guess. But as Jennifer Rubin points out in the Washington Post, despite that natural tendency, and she attributes it to Democrats, and the media's insistence that the results of the midterm elections have already been decided, Ms. Rubin says Democrats will have at their disposal a boatload of material to use in upcoming campaigns. And I agree with her. The problem is, who's listening? The people who need to listen, the Christian fascists, have shit in their ears. For one thing, Rubin points out, the bills that Democrats have supported remain very popular. The latest Navigator poll finds, quote, before reading some of the policies included in the new infrastructure legislation, net support is at plus 25 overall. That means 25 percentage points higher than the negatives, and a plus 22 among independents. After reading what this new infrastructure legislation contains, net support jumps to plus 40 overall and among independents, end quote. So, once again, we are so goddamn ignorant. We don't take the time. I'm talking about Democrats. I'm talking about liberals. I'm talking about the average person who is not a Christian fascist or a so-called conservative. And this is a failure on the part of Democrats or liberals. We don't take the time to listen to, say, Biden, what he's saying, to read what the legislation is. And you don't have to read the entire 10 billion page piece of legislation. You can just listen to what is included. Ask your Democratic House or Senate member. That's all you have to do. We don't do that, though, do we? Huh? But more specifically, Rubin writes, this poll reports, quote, bipartisan majorities support upgrading water pipes, getting the lead out of them, improving roads and bridges, upgrading power grids, expanding internet access, job training for construction and trucking, and encouraging women to enter construction and trucking. Bipartisan majorities support this. But if you listen to these Christian fascists, you don't hear this. If the 2 million people every night who listen to the Fox sewer, they don't know this. They don't know about it. And moreover, the public, the general public, already understands that Republicans are obstructionists. And the general public doesn't like it. Quote, a majority of Americans report hearing mostly negative or a mix of positive and negative things about Republicans in Congress this week, including 65% of Democrats, 54% of independents, and 42% of Republicans. Nearly 7 in 10 independents, 68%, and a third of Republicans would rather the congressional Republicans work with Biden and Democrats to pass legislation than to block anything proposed by Biden and the Democrats. So the majority of people, not in the Congress is so fucked right now with these Christian fascists, but the majority of people, even the so-called Republicans, the ones who still think they're a member of a living party, and they're not. But even they and Democrats and independents would like to see this become law to get this ship floating again. Meanwhile, in Congress, Republicans have voted against lowering the cost of child care. They have voted against Affordable Care Act premiums and prescription drugs, all included in the Build Back Better bill. And Republicans oppose these items, even though, if passed, they would help to bring inflation under control. Republicans don't give a fuck about inflation. These are, well, I still call them Republicans. These Christian fascists are interested in power. But anyway, beyond delivering on these popular items, Democrats have a rare opening in the culture wars, too, according to Jennifer Rubin. The progressive website named 19th News reports on 2 online and text surveys conducted in late September and early October for the Democratic-aligned Planned Parenthood Action Fund, Emily's List, and the American Bridge 21st Century. Here's what those surveys found. Quote, about 35% of the persuadable voters said abortion should be legal in all circumstances, and 46% said it should be legal in most cases. 83% opposed their state passing restrictions that would limit legal abortion. 71% of women and 64% of men in the group said Republicans were, quote, out of step with their own views, end quote, on abortion, more so than on guns, immigration, taxes, or health care. Now, what does that mean? Well, very simply, it means that even people who subscribe to the Christian religion are in favor of getting the hell out of this issue. It is not for the church or the state to decide. It just isn't. It's not a religious issue, although it's been turned into one. It's not a political issue, although it's been turned into one. It's an issue of privacy. It's an issue of a woman's sovereignty, her control over her own body. And Jennifer goes on, in the current political environment, the hard right position matches up poorly against the position of Democrats. Going back to the website 19th News, quote, 80% of voters surveyed said they were more likely to vote for a Democrat who favors leaving abortion decisions up to pregnant people and their doctors, and only 9% were more likely to support a Republican who favors making abortion illegal, including in early pregnancy, end quote. Now, as Senator Jean Shaheen, a Democrat in New Hampshire, put it recently, quote, I think if you want to see a revolution, go ahead, outlaw Roe v. Wade, and see what the response is, end quote. Whew. Yeah, well. So to add it all up, the dual message of Democrats is that they have delivered for voters what they promised. And Republicans are obstructionists and frightening extremists. They're Islamophobic, they're anti-vaccine, they're encouraging violence. Those arguments that the Democrats should be making are alive and well. Unlike political newcomers with no track record, Republican incumbents in the House and Senate are going to have to defend their obstructionism, or they're cheering for the criminalization of abortion and their unhinged bullshit rhetoric. They're going to have to defend it if pushed by their Democratic opponents in the right way. Rubin concludes with this. Certainly the state of the economy and the pandemic will be most determinative in next year's elections. But before Republicans break out the Republicans break out the champagne in anticipation of the historical pattern of the party in the White House losing seats in Congress, the Republicans might consider that there has never been a party as destructive, crazed, and out of step with the electorate as this one. So yes, history repeats itself until it doesn't. Jennifer Rubin writing at the Post, yeah, we can hope that history will not repeat itself this time. In the sense of the party in power in the White House losing all kinds of seats in the legislative branch. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcasts. As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com, and never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.